A woman was looked down on by flight attendants simply because of what she was wearing. But when they found out who she really was, everyone was left in shock. As sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Denver International Airport, Natalie Morgan quietly navigated the busy terminal. At 34, she carried herself with calm ease, her blonde hair tucked beneath a black baseball cap, and wore a dark gray sweatshirt paired with soft gray joggers. A slim silver bracelet on her wrist was the only hint of jewelry. To most people passing by, she looked like any other traveler choosing comfort over glamour for a long trip. No one would have guessed she was married to William Morgan, a billionaire entrepreneur who had recently added Summit Airlines to his growing list of ventures. Natalie glanced down at the modest watch that once belonged to her grandmother. She still had time before her flight to Chicago. Her parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. William had offered to send their private jet, but Natalie liked to fly commercial now and then. It kept her grounded and reminded her of where she came from. "Just a regular black coffee, thanks," she told the barista, pulling cash from her hoodie pocket, rather than flashing the high-limit credit card tucked away in her phone case. "Going somewhere special?" the barista asked. "Chicago family thing," Natalie said with a smile, dropping a few coins in the tip jar. Safe travels, coffee in hand. She strolled toward gate A22, watching as families chatted and elderly couples held hands. Business people tapped away on laptops. The mix of people always reminded her of her own humble roots in a small Colorado town, long before she met William at a tech conference, where she presented her environmental work. "Now boarding our first-class passengers for Summit Airlines Flight 782 to Chicago," came the announcement. Natalie grabbed her well-used backpack, not some designer brand, and joined the short line in the priority lane. A sharply dressed businessman gave her a quick once-over and a second glance, his surprise poorly hidden. Natalie barely noticed. She was used to it. "Boarding pass, please," the gate agent said politely. Natalie showed her phone. The woman scanned it, and her smile paused briefly when she saw first class paired with Natalie's laid-back look. "Thank you, Ms. Morgan." "Have a great flight." Natalie nodded and headed down the jet bridge, unaware that her comfy clothes would spark a chain reaction that would shake up Summit Airlines for good. The first-class cabin gleamed with luxury, spacious leather seats in deep blue polished wood accents and flight attendants offering champagne. Natalie stepped on board where Diane Phillips, one of the attendants, looked up. Her professional smile faltered just a bit at the sight of Natalie. "Good morning," Natalie said kindly, showing her seat number 2A by the window. Diane's eyebrows rose slightly. "First class is to your left," she said with a slight edge in her voice. "I know." "Thanks." Natalie walked confidently to her seat, fully aware of the glances trailing her. The other passengers looked the part. Sharp suits, elegant outfits, even a TV-famous chef. Natalie tucked her backpack into the overhead bin and sat down, pulling out an old paperback instead of a tablet or phone. "Excuse me." A male flight attendant named Andrew approached quietly but firmly. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Natalie met his wary eyes without flinching. "Sure." She pulled up the pass again on her phone. He studied it for a little too long, shifting his gaze from the screen to her casual appearance. "One moment, please." He stepped away to speak with Diane. They whispered and peeked in her direction. A businessman across the aisle tried not to stare, but it was obvious he was watching. Natalie exhaled slowly. She knew this feeling all too well when people judged your worth by what you wore. Soon Diane returned, this time with Lauren, the head flight attendant. Her tone was controlled but chilly. "Ma'am," she began, "we're seeing a bit of an issue with your boarding pass." Natalie gently placed her book down. "There's no mix-up. I'm assigned to seat 2A. First class." Lauren's polite smile became noticeably stiffer. "Sometimes our system glitches," she said. "This is the first-class cabin, and you don't think I belong here?" Natalie finished for her, her voice steady but unmistakably pointed. "Is that what you're implying?" Lauren's expression flickered with unease. That's not what I meant. We just need to double check. You've already done that twice, Natalie reminded her. And my pass clearly shows I'm seated here. By now, several first-class passengers had stopped pretending not to listen. Andrew, the male flight attendant, stood nearby with crossed arms and a tired look, like he'd seen this scenario play out before Diane chimed in, her voice polite but tinged with skepticism. It's possible you were upgraded by mistake. Or maybe Natalie replied evenly. I paid for this seat. Is there a dress code for first class? I missed. Lauren's tight smile faltered. There's no official dress code, but most of our first-class passengers prefer to dress in a way that reflects the luxury experience. Natalie gave a quiet nod. So the issue isn't my ticket. It's how I look. A well-dressed older man across the aisle cleared his throat. I've flown first class in sweatpants plenty of times. No one's ever given me grief about it. Lauren's face reddened. Sir, this is a matter between the airline and the passenger. It shouldn't be a matter at all, he said, calmly, then returned to his paper. Diane leaned over and whispered something to Lauren, who gave a small nod and turned back to Natalie. Ma'am, she said, we're on a full flight and need to make sure every passenger is seated correctly. Our records show that this seat belongs to an O. Morgan. That's me, Natalie said. Natalie. Morgan. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Do you have ID to prove that? His tone suggested he didn't believe her. Natalie held her ground, though her patience was clearly wearing thin. No one else here has been asked to show ID after boarding. The gate agent already scanned my pass, Lauren added quickly. We do ask when there are inconsistencies, and the only inconsistency here is the fact that I'm dressed differently than you expected, Natalie said firmly. You could feel the tension in the air. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A woman nearby whispered to her seatmate, just loud enough to be heard. If she bought the ticket, what's the issue? Lauren's tone sharpened. If you can't confirm your identity, we'll have to reassign you to an economy seat. Natalie sat up straighter. I can confirm who I am, but I shouldn't have to. Not when no one else here has been asked, Andrew added with a smug tone. If you really are Ms. Morgan, we're just following standard procedures. No, Natalie replied coolly. You're acting on assumptions. If I were in pearls and designer heels, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Lauren's polished demeanor finally cracked. This is becoming a disruption. Show your ID or you'll need to move to economy. Natalie glanced around. Some passengers looked at her with quiet sympathy, others with the detached interest people reserve for public conflict. She could have shut it all down by dropping her husband's name, but that wasn't how she operated. She never used William's status to open doors or shield herself from uncomfortable moments. This is discrimination, Natalie said clearly. I paid for my seat like anyone else. Ma'am, Lauren said in a colder tone. We need to finish boarding. You can verify your ID, accept a new seat in economy or D-plane. The unfairness of it all was infuriating, but Natalie knew pushing back harder would only hold up the flight. Fine, she said at last, but I want all your names and employee IDs. This isn't over. Andrew let out a small, smug smile. We'll find you a spot in economy and refund the difference. I don't want a refund, Natalie shot back, grabbing her backpack. I want someone to be held accountable. As she stood, some passengers gave her supportive glances. Others avoided eye contact, pretending they weren't part of it. The older man who'd spoken up earlier shook his head with visible frustration. With Diane walking beside her like a guard escorting someone out, Natalie made her way from first class toward the economy cabin. The folks in business class watched her pass, their quiet murmurs trailing behind. She kept her posture straight, refusing to show how deeply this stung. Here's your seat, Diane said, pointing to a cramped middle seat. We apologize for the inconvenience. Natalie looked her straight in the eyes. No, you don't, but you just might soon. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to hit subscribe for more eye-opening stories where life takes a turn no one saw coming. Now, let's see how things unfold for Natalie. The next morning, sunlight poured over the Summit Airlines headquarters in Denver, glinting off the sleek glass and steel structure nestled against the Rockies, a bold symbol of the company's high-end reputation. Inside the executive suite, Karen Winters, the chief customer officer, scanned the agenda with growing unease. The quarterly customer experience review was set for 10 a.m., and the numbers weren't pretty. Passenger complaints had jumped 11% since last quarter, and most of them were about employee attitude. The board members will be present. Her assistant reminded her, and Mr. Morgan confirmed he'll be attending in person. Karen's stomach turned. William Morgan had taken over Summit Airlines 9 months ago, and this would be his first live appearance at a quarterly meeting. He was known for expecting nothing short of excellence, and for having little patience when people didn't deliver. "Make sure Lauren Reynolds and her first-class crew are there," Karen instructed. "Their numbers have been stellar. We need something positive to point to." Elsewhere in the city, William was adjusting his tie in the mirror of their penthouse bedroom. At 38, he had the calm, commanding energy of someone who had earned every ounce of his success. The tailored navy suit and crisp white shirt he wore weren't for show. They were simply his everyday standard. "Are you sure you don't want me to address this directly with the flight crew?" he asked, glancing at Natalie's reflection as she sat on the edge of the bed. Natalie shook her head. "This isn't about revenge, Alex. It's about pushing for real change." "They embarrassed my wife," he said quietly, the anger beneath his calm voice sharp. "That feels personal." She stood and gently adjusted his tie, even though it was already perfect. "And I love that you feel that way. But this isn't about me or just those 3 people. It's about a deeper problem, judging people based on how they look instead of who they are." William looked at her, the admiration in his eyes unmistakable. Natalie had never let wealth shift her values. That clarity, that unshakable sense of self was one of the many reasons he'd fallen for her. "Okay," he said. "We'll do it your way." He glanced at the time. "The meeting starts in an hour. Are you sure this is how you want to handle it?" "I'm absolutely sure," Natalie replied, her voice steady. "And I'm wearing exactly what I wore yesterday." Back at Summit Airlines, HQ. The boardroom was filling up with top execs, department heads, and invited staff. Toward the back, Lauren, Andrew, and Diane from the first-class crew sat together, clearly surprised they'd been asked to join such a high-level meeting. "They must be forming that elite service team they've been talking about," Andrew whispered to Diane. "We'd be perfect to lead it." Diane smiled as she smoothed her immaculate uniform. "Word is, the new owner's going to be here." "Could be our moment." Lauren shushed them just as Karen Winters began the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, customer satisfaction is the heart of what we promise at Summit Airlines. Today we'll go over our quarterly performance and brainstorm how to raise the bar." A hush fell over the room as the door opened. William Morgan stepped in, tall, composed, the kind of presence that made everyone sit up straighter. "Mr. Morgan," Karen greeted. "We're honored to have you with us." He gave a polite nod and took the seat at the head of the table. "Please go ahead." The presentation kicked off with slides showing data trends and performance metrics. Karen did her best to stay positive, highlighting the good and gently framing the not-so-good. William said, little quietly jotting notes in a leather notebook. "And now," Karen said, her voice lifting, "let's talk about our success stories. Our first-class team on long-haul flights has maintained a 92% satisfaction rating, well above the industry standard. Some of that incredible team is with us today." She motioned toward Lauren, Andrew, and Diane. For the first time, William turned and looked directly at them. His face remained unreadable. In fact, Karen continued, "I've asked Lauren Reynolds, our senior first-class cabin lead, to share her team's strategies for delivering a premium experience." Lauren walked to the front of the room with practiced confidence, ready to speak. "Thank you, Karen," she began. "At Summit Airlines, we believe the first-class journey starts the moment a passenger steps onto the plane. We're trained to recognize and serve the needs of premium travelers, people who expect and deserve a certain level of attention. The door at the back of the conference room opened quietly, unnoticed at first. "We focus on the details," Lauren continued, "from how we greet our passengers to maintaining the refined atmosphere of the first-class cabin." Her voice trailed off as she noticed that William Morgan's attention had suddenly shifted. Lauren turned to see what had drawn his gaze. Standing just inside the door was a woman in a dark gray hoodie, soft gray sweatpants, and a black cap. The same woman from yesterday's flight. For a second, Lauren didn't quite register it. Then recognition kicked in, followed quickly by confusion. Andrew and Diane exchanged wide-eyed glances, both immediately realizing who she was. William stood. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his voice didn't carry even a hint of apology. "But I believe some of you are already familiar with my wife, Natalie Morgan." The entire room seemed to freeze. Shock settled like a fog. Lauren stood at the front, her polished composure cracking under the weight of what was happening. Andrew and Diane visibly sank into their seats, color draining from their faces. Around the table, executives and board members looked back and forth between William Natalie and the 3 flight crew members piecing together the story. Your wife, Karen Winters, finally managed to say, barely audible, "Yes," William said, his tone cool and deliberate. "She flew from Denver to Chicago yesterday. On our airline. In first class." Each sentence landed like a gavel striking wood. Natalie moved to stand next to him, still wearing the same outfit she'd worn during the flight, the one that had caused so much trouble. The soft glint from her silver bracelet was the only visible sign of wealth. "Lauren, William said you were just explaining Summit Airlines' approach to identifying premium passengers. Please go on." Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it completely, thrown off script. The bullet points on her note cards suddenly meant nothing. Diane stared at the table like it might swallow her whole, and Andrew's usual confidence had drained into full-blown panic. There must have been a mistake," Lauren stammered. "A mistake," William repeated, his voice low. Interesting word choice. He turned to his wife, "Natalie, would you describe what happened yesterday as a simple mistake?" Natalie stepped forward, her voice steady, her presence calm. Unlike William, whose quiet anger was barely concealed, she projected something even more powerful. Clarity. "No," she said. "What happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was bias. I wasn't evaluated based on my ticket, which had been checked several times. I was judged by how I looked." Her eyes met those of Lauren, Andrew, and Diane. "You decided I didn't fit the mold of a first-class passenger. You questioned whether I had the right to be there. You asked for proof of identity that you didn't request from anyone else, and then in front of everyone, you marched me to economy as if I'd done something wrong." The room was silent, except for the sound of someone clearing their throat. Uncomfortably. Mr. Morgan, a board member, said, "Maybe this is something we could handle privately." "No," William cut in sharply. "This is exactly what this meeting is for. And to be clear, I'm not just speaking as a husband, though. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't furious. I'm speaking as the owner of this airline, and I'm deeply concerned about a workplace culture that judges people by their looks instead of treating every customer with dignity." Karen Winters looked like she'd swallowed a brick. "Mr. Morgan, I can assure you this behavior doesn't represent our values." "Are you sure about that?" Natalie asked gently. "Because after what happened, I spoke with other flight attendants and airport employees, and I heard story after story just like mine." She placed a folder on the table. A teenager in a hoodie questioned repeatedly despite having a business class ticket. A person with a disability held up at the priority line. An older woman in simple clothes denied access to the first-class lounge even though she had the credentials. She opened the folder slightly. 27 documented incidents in just the last 3 months. Same pattern, different faces. This wasn't just about 3 flight attendants. It was about an entire mindset. The weight of Natalie's words hit the room like a wave. Karen slowly reached for the folder Natalie had placed on the table, her fingers trembling. "I had no idea," she said softly. "That's the problem," William replied. "You should have. These incidents weren't hidden. They were reported but brushed off as simple misunderstandings and buried in your feedback system. Lauren had finally pulled herself together enough to try damage control. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. She began, her tone measured and apologetic on behalf of our team. I want to extend my deepest apologies for what happened yesterday. We're trained to follow certain ID verification protocols. Stop, Natalie said calmly but with authority. You're still missing the point. This isn't about procedures. Tell me, when the man in 2C wore sweatpants last month, did you ask for his ID? What about the celebrity in 1A with sunglasses and a baseball cap? Did you question her right to be there? The issue isn't the policy. It's how selectively you applied it, sensing things slipping even further. Andrew spoke up. Mrs. Morgan, we had no way of knowing who you were. That's exactly the point, Natalie answered. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic respect. My value as a customer isn't tied to my last name, my net worth, or what I'm wearing. I paid for that ticket like everyone else. A heavy silence settled over the room. The truth in her voice left nowhere to hide. William looked directly at the 3 flight attendants. What you did yesterday showed poor judgment and blatant bias. At many companies, that alone would be enough for termination. Lauren. Andrew and Diane visibly tensed, waiting for the hammer to fall. But firing you, William continued, wouldn't fix the deeper issue. It might make us feel better in the short term, but it would leave the system that created this behavior untouched. He shifted his focus to the room as a whole. Starting next week, we're launching a company-wide anti-bias training program for every team member who interacts with customers. We're also updating our feedback systems to flag and investigate any reports involving discrimination or unequal treatment. Natalie stepped forward and turned to the 3 crew members. As for the 3 of you, you'll be reassigned for now. 1 month working with the customer advocacy team, handling complaints face-to-face. 1 month serving in economy class. After that, if your evaluations show that you've truly understood the impact of these behaviors, you'll be welcome to apply for your first-class roles again. Karen. Winters, clearly shaken, found her voice. I'll personally make sure these changes are implemented, Mr. and Mrs. Morgans. And I think the passengers you mentioned in your report should receive a formal apology and compensation. William gave a firm nod and turned back to the flight attendants. This isn't about punishment. It's about awareness. Premium service isn't defined by how you treat people who look important. It's defined by how you treat every single person, no matter what they look like. The weight of those words settled into the room. Then, for the first time since the meeting began, board chair. Eleanor Simmons spoke. Mrs. Morgan, she said, her voice steady. Thank you. You've shown a light on a blind spot that could have kept hurting our passengers and damaging our brand. This is a turning point. Lauren. Andrew and Diane sat in stunned silence. Their usual self-assurance had vanished, replaced with the realization that they weren't being fired, but something possibly more difficult was being asked of them. A second chance, if they chose to learn from it. 3 months later, Natalie took her seat. 2A on Summit Airlines Flight 923 from Denver to San Francisco. She was dressed exactly as she had been that day. Dark gray sweatshirt, soft gray sweatpants, black cap. She opened her book and settled in for the flight to a climate conference. Good morning, Mrs. Morgan, a familiar voice said. Can I get you something to drink before we take off? She looked up. Andrew stood beside her, his posture professional, his expression sincere. The condescension from their last encounter was gone. In its place was something that looked very much like respect. Just water for now. Thank you, she replied. As he set the glass on her armrest, he paused. Mrs. Morgan, I'm not sure if you remember me. I remember you, Andrew? He nodded slowly. Thank you, he said quietly. These last few months, I've learned a lot. Natalie looked at him thoughtfully. How was your time in customer advocacy? Humbling, he admitted. I had no idea how many people feel ignored or judged because of how they look. Things I never used to notice, tiny remarks, assumptions. I see them all now, Andrew said. Natalie gave a small nod. Most people do, she replied. Down the aisle, she spotted Diane helping an elderly man in worn jeans gently lift his well-used duffel into the overhead bin. Her tone was warm, her movements patient. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was real. The program you and Mr. Morgan put in place really made a difference. Andrew continued. Not just in what we do, but how we see people. I'm glad to hear that. He straightened back into his roll voice, steady and professional. Enjoy your flight, Mrs. Morgan. If there's anything you need, I'm just a call away. As he stepped away to help other passengers, Natalie noticed Lauren in the galley focused and composed as she prepped for takeoff. Their eyes met for just a second, and Lauren gave a subtle, respectful nod. Not the forced kind that comes from fear, but one that came from mutual understanding. The changes at Summit Airlines hadn't stopped with 3 crew members. The anti-bias training rolled out across every level. Check-in counters, flight staff, executive offices. Passenger satisfaction was trending upward, and morale among employees had lifted as well. Team members now felt empowered to treat every traveler with fairness and kindness. More importantly, other airlines had taken notice. Summit's new focus on inclusive service was setting a precedent, shaking up outdated ideas about what high-end treatment really meant. As the plane cruised above a patchwork of land and cloud, Natalie stared out the window, thoughtful. One humiliating experience had sparked something powerful, not through outrage or public fallout, but through the tougher road of education, reflection, and change. Her phone buzzed. A message from William. How's the flight? She smiled, typing back. Different, better. 2 rows ahead, a young woman in ripped jeans and a thrifted tee laughed softly with a friend. She sat in first class sipping tea with the same thoughtful service offered to the business travelers beside her. No second glances, no awkward pauses, no invisible walls suggesting she didn't belong. This, Natalie realized, was the real win. Not just righting a wrong done to her, but the small, everyday acts of respect now being shown to people who might have once been overlooked. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Lauren approached with the drink cart moving down the aisle with ease and grace. She treated each passenger with the same genuine care. When she reached Natalie, there was a brief pause, a quiet moment of connection. Mrs. Morgan, she said softly. What you and Mr. Morgan did. It was fair, more than fair. And it made us better. Natalie nodded. That was the goal, not to punish, but to grow. Lauren's voice lowered slightly. I've started seeing people differently. I question my assumptions now. It's changed how I treat everyone, not just the ones in first class. As she moved on, Natalie let herself reflect. Real change rarely comes through bold declarations. It comes in smaller personal shifts in choices reinforced by systems that support better habits in leadership that's willing to fix the root of the problem, not just the symptoms. The plane gently tilted west toward San Francisco, carrying a mix of faces, backgrounds, and stories, each person different, but all equally worthy of respect. It was such a basic idea, yet so easily lost in a world too quick to judge. For Natalie Morgan, still in her favorite sweatshirt and cap, the win wasn't that she could now board first class without anyone questioning her. The win was that more and more so could everyone else. Stories like Natalie's remind us that real progress doesn't come from punishment, but from learning and accountability. Have you ever been judged by how you look or caught yourself doing the same to someone else? Share your story in the comments. If this story of growth and justice spoke to you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that shine a light on the everyday moments that change lives. Hit the bell so you never miss an episode and join our community of people who believe empathy and understanding can lead to a better world.